At 11:47 p.m. on Saturday night, May 23, 2026, Vladimir Zelensky released a message unlike anything previously issued by a Ukrainian president. It was not an appeal for calm. It was not a statement promising defensive readiness. Instead, it carried a warning based on intelligence shared by American and European sources. Zelensky informed the public that Russia was preparing to launch a specific weapon. He identified it by its exact model designation. The Kremlin had deployed it only twice during 4 years of full-scale conflict because it remained the most psychologically intimidating non-nuclear weapon in Russia's arsenal. He warned Ukrainians that the Oreshnik was incoming. He urged civilians to move into shelters immediately. He stated that the coming hours would become some of the worst Kiev had endured in a very long time. The warning proved accurate. During the early hours of Sunday morning, Russia unleashed a massive combined assault on Ukraine's capital. Fires erupted across the city. Continuous explosions shook residential districts for hours. Ukraine's Air Force reported that Russia launched 600 drones together with 90 missiles during the attack. Among them was the hypersonic ballistic missile known as the Oreshnik, a system capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. Ukrainian air defenses managed to intercept the majority of the drones, along with more than half of the incoming missiles. 600 drones, 90 missiles. The Oreshnik was the same weapon Vladimir Putin introduced publicly in late 2024. At the time, he described its speed as resembling a meteorite and claimed no air defense system on Earth could stop it. Alongside the Oreshnik, Russia also fired Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, Zircon cruise missiles, and Iskander ballistic missiles. Every category of major weapon in Russia's arsenal was launched simultaneously against one city in a single night. Not the front line, Kiev, the capital city. A population of 3 million people spent the night underground in subway shelters while fires consumed neighborhoods above them. The attack caused extensive destruction. Vladimir Zelensky stated that Kiev received the largest number of strikes and remained the primary target of the Russian operation. Reported targets included a water supply facility, schools, residential structures, and a market. "He's truly insane," Zelensky said in reference to Putin. Schools, a water facility, a marketplace. Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko reported damage in every district of the city. He added that no military or law enforcement facilities were located near the damaged college building. Every district. Not one isolated military zone, not a single industrial sector. Every district in a city where millions of civilians live, work, raise children, and buy food was struck. Russia described the operation as retaliation. According to Russian statements, Oreshnik, Iskander, Kinzhal, and Zircon missiles were launched in response to Ukrainian attacks on civilian targets inside Russia. Ukraine denied deliberately targeting civilians. Moscow pointed specifically to the Starobilsk strike. Russian officials accused Ukraine of carrying out a drone attack against a building in Russian-occupied Luhansk region, claiming 21 students inside a dormitory were killed. Ukraine rejected the accusation and stated the strike targeted an elite drone command unit operating from the area. Russia claimed that 42 additional people were injured in the incident. At this stage, neither version could be independently verified. What could be confirmed was something else entirely. Russia responded to one disputed strike in occupied Ukrainian territory with 600 drones and 90 missiles aimed across every district of Kiev, including verified impacts on schools, residential areas, and a water supply facility. Whatever occurred in Starobilsk, Russia's response represented a level of force completely disproportionate under any accepted interpretation of the laws governing armed conflict. Yet the issue of proportionality was not the central story of that night. The more important question was why Russia chose this course of action, what message the Kremlin intended to send, and how Ukraine would eventually answer. Because Zelensky did not describe Putin as restrained, measured, or calculating. He called him insane. In Kiev's Shevchenko district, a 5-story residential building was struck and caught fire. One civilian was killed. A separate attack damaged a school while civilians sheltered inside the structure. A school filled with people attempting to escape the bombardment itself. The building was still hit. The Oreshnik, the missile Putin once claimed could not be intercepted, was reportedly directed toward Bila Tserkva, a city with a population of 200,000 located 50 miles south of Kiev. The hours-long bombardment included the launch of that advanced ballistic missile system capable of carrying nuclear warheads. This marked only the third known use of the Oreshnik during the entire full-scale war. 3 deployments in 4 years. Each launch carried enormous cost for Russia. The system required specialized production, advanced components, and extensive preparation. Russia did not possess unlimited numbers of these missiles. Every time the weapon was used, it signaled something significant. A state does not deploy its rarest and most psychologically powerful conventional weapon against a residential city unless ordinary attacks are failing to create the desired effect. The reason behind Russia crossing that threshold mattered because it shaped everything expected afterward. The explanation pointed toward the Cheboksary strike, the Votkinsk strike, the Baltic Sea oil terminal attacks, the 550-drone swarm that struck Moscow on May 17th. It also pointed toward years of repeated declarations from Boris Rosen about Malotok-Machka, while Ukraine ultimately recaptured the village. Russia's spring offensive deployed a record 8,000 drones during April and still ended with a net territorial loss of 45 square miles. For months, Vladimir Putin has watched Ukraine's long-range strike operations steadily damage the industrial backbone supporting Russia's war effort. He has watched Russian commanders promise breakthroughs in Donbass that never arrived. He has seen battlefield maps begin moving in the opposite direction for the first time in 18 months. He has also watched Vladimir Zelensky stand among destroyed buildings in Kiev, speaking with the confidence of someone convinced he is prevailing. The Oreshnik became Putin's response to all of it, not a battlefield solution. There is no military logic connecting a strike on Bielitserkva with recovering the 45 square miles Russia lost in April. The purpose was psychological. The message was simple. Ukraine could hit factories. Ukraine could target oil terminals. Ukrainian drones could even reach Moscow. But Russia could still deliver something Ukraine could not mirror in return. A weapon moving like a meteorite toward a city of 200,000 people. A reminder directed not only at Ukraine, but also at Western governments supplying weapons that the conflict still contains a nuclear-capable escalation ladder and that Russia is prepared to move upward on it. That was the threshold crossed on Saturday night. Not a military boundary, a psychological one. Russia used a nuclear-capable weapon against a civilian city, not out of battlefield necessity, but as an instrument of terror. 600 drones were sent toward every district of the capital simultaneously, not to eliminate one defined military objective, but to ensure civilians felt unsafe everywhere inside their own city. Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president now serving as deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, described the strikes as retaliation for recent Ukrainian long-range attacks inside Russia. And we must strike just like today and even much harder, Medvedev wrote on Telegram. He continued by saying that ruins and gray ashes replacing capital symbols could demoralize an enemy just as effectively as losing a battle flag. Ruins. Gray ashes. The deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council publicly called for Kiev to become ruins and gray ashes, not as rhetorical exaggeration, but as strategic policy and as an openly declared objective from one of Russia's highest-ranking security officials. That was the line crossed by Russia through the Oreshnik launch, the 600 drones, and the attacks on schools, residential buildings, and water facilities spread across every district of a city that was not considered a military target by any accepted definition. Now came Ukraine's response. When Zelensky declared that the attack could not remain without consequences, it was not symbolic language. It was a direct commitment supported by capabilities Ukraine had spent 18 months building, testing, and improving. It's important that this does not remain without consequences for Russia, Zelensky stated. He added that decisions were needed from the United States, Europe, and other partners. Decisions from Washington. That was the immediate request following the Oreshnik strike. Not merely continued weapons deliveries, not only financial assistance. The issue involved targeting permissions. It involved the limits placed on what Ukraine could strike inside Russian territory. It involved whether restrictions maintained by the United States regarding Ukraine's use of Western weapons would now be loosened after Russia employed a nuclear-capable missile against a Ukrainian city of 200,000 residents. The Oreshnik strike on Bielitserkva became Zelensky's argument in real time for allowing deeper attacks into Russian territory using Western systems. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced through social media that the European Union would provide additional support to strengthen Ukraine's air defense network. The United States copied the concept, improved the economics, added coordinated swarm intelligence, and then turned the upgraded version against the systems that inspired it. If the conflict resumes, the primary targets for a hive mind-equipped Lucas swarm would be the radar installations, communication towers, and surveillance arrays positioned on islands surrounding the Strait of Hormuz. Those systems are essential to Iran's ability to monitor shipping traffic and maintain situational awareness throughout the strait. The PGSMA depends on surveillance infrastructure to identify vessels moving through the region and demand transit fees. The Lucas swarm now possesses the capability to systematically eliminate that infrastructure in a coordinated and economically sustainable way. Then attention shifted toward the RQ-170 and RQ-180 reconnaissance operations above the strait. Understanding those aircraft explains why Iran's drone shoot-down claims require deeper analysis. The RQ-170 Sentinel is a stealth reconnaissance drone. It uses a flying wing configuration without tail surfaces and incorporates radar-absorbing materials that produce a minimal radar signature. It was specifically designed for missions inside contested airspace controlled by adversaries possessing advanced air defense systems. The RQ-180 represents the next generation successor. Larger, longer endurance, even more advanced stealth capabilities. Reports placing both systems over the Hormuz region align perfectly with their intended mission profiles. These are the aircraft used when continuous surveillance is required over areas where hostile air defense capability still exists, and where less stealthy reconnaissance assets would face unacceptable risk. Their missions above Hormuzan province involve constructing the most detailed possible understanding of the Strait's mine environment from the air. They monitor Iranian military deployments along the coastline. They track movements involving Iranian military vehicles and naval vessels that could signal violations of the ceasefire. They also verify whether Iran is attempting to rebuild military capabilities during the 60-day negotiation period, after Operation Epic Fury spent 84 days systematically destroying them. This is the maximum technical application of the trust but verify approach. Iran can issue whatever public statements it chooses regarding reopening the Strait or participating in nuclear negotiations. The RQ-170 and RQ-180 operations over Hormuzan province are what the United States actually relies upon to determine whether Iranian actions match Iranian promises. So when Iran shoots down a drone over the province controlling the Strait on the same day it signs a framework intended to reopen the same waterway, it is targeting the very surveillance architecture that makes any agreement enforceable. That is why the drone incident cannot simply be dismissed as routine military friction during complicated negotiations. Iran was striking at the verification system designed to prevent cheating on the agreement it had just accepted. Then, the focus expanded beyond the Persian Gulf and toward the Pacific theater. China began conducting operations in the South China Sea and the Western Pacific that drew serious attention during a week when most analysts remained focused almost entirely on the Strait of Hormuz. The PLA Navy launched 2 major deployments across the South China Sea and Western Pacific. The timing was deliberate. Both deployments coincided directly with the Balikatan 2026 military exercises involving the United States and the Philippines. Balikatan means shoulder to shoulder in Tagalog. The annual exercise between American and Philippine forces has steadily expanded in size and ambition as Chinese assertiveness throughout the region has intensified. China's decision to carry out 2 large naval deployments during those exercises was not accidental scheduling. It was a calculated demonstration directed toward both Manila and Washington, signaling that Chinese naval forces could continue operating at scale throughout the South China Sea and Western Pacific, regardless of simultaneous American and Philippine military activity. Taiwan's National Security Council has been monitoring Chinese naval movements and estimates that approximately 100 Chinese military vessels are currently operating within the first island chain. That chain includes Japan, Okinawa, Taiwan, and the Philippines, forming the strategic maritime perimeter surrounding China's immediate operational environment. The Pratas Islands have now entered a second consecutive day of standoff activity between Chinese Coast Guard vessels and Taiwan's Coast Guard. Those islands sit roughly 400 kilometers from Taiwan's main island. They are lightly defended, they occupy strategically valuable territory. And China is probing them because Beijing correctly understands where American strategic attention is currently concentrated. Washington remains focused on the Iran negotiations, the Archnik strike against Kiev, the Memorial Day KC-135 tragedy, the Abraham Accords proposal, and the domestic conflict over war powers authority. Every degree of American attention directed toward the Persian Gulf becomes attention unavailable for the first island chain. China understands this dynamic. China was built to exploit these windows. The simultaneous 3-front pressure strategy, documented throughout the conflict involving Russia and Ukraine, Iran in the Gulf, and China in the Pacific, is specifically designed to create exhaustion. Critics describing the situation as American overextension are reacting to exactly what the strategy intends to produce. The objective is to make the United States feel unable to focus sufficiently on any single theater. If the Iran agreement ultimately resolves the nuclear issue and genuinely reopens the Strait of Hormuz, one of those 3 pressure fronts disappears. That would allow American strategic attention to concentrate far more heavily on the remaining 2. The next 60 days may determine whether that outcome becomes reality. If you want deeper coverage of the military, political, and strategic developments shaping this conflict, stay connected for the next breakdown.